is to blame for all the misfortunes of the Russian people? No, it's not laziness and apathy, not the wild primitive civility before authority, and not the dwarf fascists entrenched in the Kremlin. It's all Chubey's fault, the redhead scourge of the Russian people. Chubey's the main bogeyman of Russia. Chubey, like the Neviska from the Ukrainian proverbs, to blame for everything.
Was it Boris Chubey or some Moshe Israelovich lives there? Why are you doing this? I don't understand.
And now, on the brink of economic collapse, Russians know exactly whose handiwork this is. In Moscow, 3 deputy heads of Rosnano have been arrested. And who was in charge of Rosnano? That's right.
In Moscow, 3 former deputies of Chubey at Rosnano have been detained, and a criminal case has been opened against them. Those detained are Executive Director Boris Podolsky, Managing Director of Finance Artur Galstyan, and Director of Taxation and Reporting Marina Kosenkova.
The Rosnano executives are accused of major financial operations and squandering state property. And all of this was under Chubey's management. Rosnano lied to its shareholders, and there is only one shareholder, the Russian Federation, about its actual financial situation, in order to hide its disastrous economic results and achievements. As a result, the state kept allocating billions to non-existent or stillborn projects. In just 2 years, 43 billion were poured in there. So what kind of brainchild of Chubey is this Rosnano? Rosnano is direct proof that Russia is run by an organized criminal group, and Rosnano is its money laundering operation.
The first thing I want to say is we have a lot of money.
Rosnano was created in 2007 when Medvedev was given the chance to play with the presidential ID, and he could even ride the trolley bus for free with it. Back then, the words nano and high-tech were heard in the Kremlin more often than Lenin. You bastard! Why did you invent Ukraine? At that time, the Kremlin mobsters were enjoying their fattest years. Oil was flowing like a river at record prices. The entire opposition had been pushed under the baseboard. And in the West, everyone was admiring Dostoevsky, ballet, and a bare-chested man on a horse. It was the perfect time to rob the country.
That was a reference to Dostoevsky's novel The Idiot, in case anyone didn't get it.
Billions spent on palaces, escorts, and 100-meter yachts had to be laundered somehow. Now, no one even bothers to report to the Russian people. Back then, they still tried to pretend they cared about the law. Even that show was not for the common folk, but for Western partners.
Investor interest in the development of nanotechnology in Russia is growing. Just in the past year, the volume of investments has increased by 1/3. Sergei Kulikov, the head of Rosnano, told Vladimir Putin about this today. And the company is 15 years old. In that time, 150 new factories opened. Their products are vital in many areas.
And that's where the old red-haired dog Chubey really came in handy.
What? Oh, again?
Chubey is the father of the economic hell of the 90s. It was he who came up with vouchers and was responsible for the insane privatization when metallurgical plants were bought for the price of sweatpants. It was Chubey who made state embezzlement into a state ideology.
In 1991, he brought Chubey into Gaidar's government. The main task was to put the economy on a market track quickly, but the first months of reforms led to impoverishment and the threat of famine. At the same time, Chubey pushed forward relentlessly. After price liberalization, he announced privatization, a total sell-off of state property.
It's actually funny that Putin considers his most significant achievement to be getting Russia out of the 90s. Let's reveal a secret to Russians. It was the calendar that got Russia out of the 90s. And the gang that was robbing the country in the 90s never went anywhere. On the contrary, one member became president. Well, a little one like this. There you go, Chubey. In France, they're like this Stalin, Chubey. He was a kind of mentor to the young balding KGB officer and a comrade of Sobchak. That's the one whose suitcases Putin used to carry. Naturally, when the cigarette butt came to power, he didn't forget the red-haired genie. Of course, when it came to massive financial schemes, Chubey was immediately pulled out of the golden attic and told to go.
Anatoly Borisovich Chubey remains a very necessary figure for us.
How can you inconspicuously launder billions in dirty money and do it in such a way that the people are actually happy about it? That's exactly why Rosnano was created, the Russian state corporation for the development of nanotechnologies and high-tech industries. Sounds like catch up with and surpass the West. The common folk are losing their minds over this handout. Now, with our nanotechnologies, we'll really show them who's boss.
American investors are ready to invest about $1 billion in the development of Russian nanotechnologies. These are the preliminary results of the visit to Moscow by entrepreneurs from the USA. The impressive business delegation was led by California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger.
In 2007, Rosnano Laundromat started operating at full capacity. The scheme was perfect. They would invent unrealistic technologies, for which unbelievable amounts of money were allocated from the state budget sums comparable to the budgets of entire regions. Nuclear medicine, nanobiopharmaceuticals, nanotech space robotics, nano-quantum printers, and many other things with the prefix nano.
President Dmitry Medvedev stated this while speaking at the opening of the second International Nanotechnology Forum.
Subtitles by Dimeterzak. In total, Rosnano received funding for 150 projects, and almost all of them existed only on paper. By 2023, the company's debt had reached 95 billion rubles, and it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Not only did they fail to achieve anything in nuclear medicine, Rosnano couldn't even invent a nano-latch for a toilet. Hundreds of billions simply vanished, like dew on the red hair of nano-chubeis.
We're really talking about high-tech. We're talking about what is called cutting edge in the most advanced technologies in this field.
Let's break down this scheme with concrete examples. Rosnano received money for a plant to produce lithium-ion batteries, Lyotech, in Novosibirsk. They claimed it would be the largest production facility in the world. It was opened in 2011, and 15 billion rubles were allocated from Russians' pockets. Taking inflation into account, today that would be 75 billion. That's a quarter of the entire budget of the Novosibirsk region. In theory, the whole of Russia should be flooded with lithium batteries. Even balalaikas and samovars should be running on these batteries. Even Medvedev's personal moonshine still. Next up, the Commander-in-Chief, Commander of the Honor Zone, second year of election, candidate Mukienko. Good afternoon, all good. But this plant never reached its planned capacity, and in 2019 it began bankruptcy proceedings, having accumulated 10 billion in debt. The question arises, who was bombing Lyotech for 8 years? Over 8 years, the state poured billions into setting up production. But the production was never launched. Instead, the state ended up owing another 10 billion. You don't have to be Hercule Poirot to figure out that the state funds were simply funneled through Rosnano and then siphoned off as non-state money. No one ever intended to spend anything on production. The money was immediately sent off to Cyprus and Panama.
Here comes the money. Here we go.
A global, shameless nano-laundromat. Just imagine how the whole thing works. They make up a technology out of thin air. For example, nano-kefir that effectively fights nano-hangovers. And they spend budget money on its development. In the end, there's neither nano-kefir nor money, just a hangover. Well, except for a palace in Gelendzhik and a personal nano-brothel at Rosneft.
Very beautiful. She looks like our other heroine. But apparently more important, She flew more than 15 times with Sechin on his private jet to the Emirates, Qatar, Morocco, and the Maldives.
Rosneft is the equivalent of Rosnano. It operates on the same principle. Oil flows in and promises of greatness flow out. Russians like to think about greatness, while the head of Rosneft enjoys spending Russians' money on elite women of low social responsibility.
All in all, they got a good result.
Rosnano is an element of the global criminal network called the Lake Cooperative. But, as in any criminal gang, there are constant squabbles and divisions of the loot inside. With the start of the full-scale invasion, Chubey suddenly fled Russia, leaving Russians with a broken nanotroph.
So, in this advanced nanotechnology structure, the organization that he headed for many years, there's a big hole, a huge hole specifically, a financial one, that is, he's afraid of some potential criminal cases. So he switched, he even went underground in Israel just to avoid any possible consequences.
The whole Chubey's gang started getting caught and eliminated, because when the laundromat collapsed, it was necessary to quickly erase all traces and witnesses. It's practically impossible to find out how much money the Kremlin actually laundered through Rosnano. But that amount is hardly something the average Russian could even comprehend. Rosnano is the greatest scam of the early 21st century. And it will be the end of the Russian pseudo-empire. Because with the disappearance of Rosnano, the Kremlin had to look for another laundromat. And now that function is being carried out by the special military operation. Almost half of Russia's budget is now funneled through the war. Trillions of rubles were laundered just in preparation for this war on all sorts of Armata tanks, 20th generation fighter jets, and the mythical Poseidons.
The Russian underwater drone Poseidon, it approaches its target at a depth of 1 kilometer, moving at 200 kilometers per hour. There is no way to stop this underwater drone. It carries a warhead with a yield of up to 100 megatons. The explosion of this thermonuclear torpedo off the coast of Britain would create a giant tsunami wave up to 500 meters high. Such a water surge would also carry extremely high doses of radiation.
Today, the war continues to drain the lifeblood from the former empire, and Russia truly will not survive this laundering anymore.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.